Better managing our body and our energy is just one key to affecting our motivation. And in this video, I'm going to share 7 things that we can do to better manage our body and our energy. Hello, it's Charles again, your friendly wellness coach. And if you already watched the video that I created titled Understanding Motivation 1, then you know that motivation is a complex subject and it's impossible to fully understand it with any one idea. But the idea that I shared in Understanding Motivation 1 was this. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions change all the time based on situation. And if we think about our situation holistically, we can consider what's happening in our body, what's happening in our mind, and what's happening in our life. Now, in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about the situation in our body, what's happening in our body. Now, I'm going to start by giving you the biggest no-brainer statement about motivation ever made. When our energy is high, our motivation also tends to be high. And when our energy is low, our motivation to do things also tends to be low. And so with just this simple idea, it makes sense that when we can manage our body and manage our energy, that can have an influence on our motivation level. Now, the 7 things that I want to talk to you about today are sleep, movement, nutrition. You're like, yeah, Charles, I already knew those 3 things. But I also want to add in 4 additional things, and those are posture, breathing, our experience of pain, and our physical connection to other people. Okay, we're going to come back and talk about each one of those individually. But first, let's just take a moment to talk about the body-mind connection, or mind-body connection, if you will. Now, we all know that there is a body-mind, mind-body connection. And if we try to keep it simple, what happens in our body can affect what happens in our mind, and vice versa. What happens in our mind can affect what happens in our body. Now, I also want to introduce you to a metaphor that I first heard when I read the book, How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett. Dr. Barrett's one of the most cited neuroscientists, and she used the term body budget often when she tries to explain the relationship between the body and the brain. Now, if we think about it, the way our brain initially evolved, it evolved to regulate our body. And with updated neuroscience, we know that our brain is a predictive machine. It's always running simulations, trying to figure out what's going to happen next so that it can send resources to certain areas of our body and keep fueling all of our processes. And so there is such a strong relationship between what's going on in our body and what's going on in our brain. And when our body budget is in a deficit, it is more likely that we will experience negative emotions. And when our body budget is balanced or in surplus, it's more likely that we'll experience positive emotions. Okay, so here's a thought about body connected to behavior. Our physical state, our physiology precedes our mood. Our mood precedes our thinking, and our thinking precedes our behavior. So when we think about a behavior that we want to change, sometimes we just don't feel like it. We're not in the mood. And what many people do is they try to get to the behavior by focusing on their thinking. But because mood and our physiology precedes our thinking, sometimes the best way to change our mood is to change something about our physiology. And you probably know this from your own experience, but exercise and movement is something that can change our mood really, really dramatically and quickly. Okay, so there is a mind-body connection. Our brain evolved to regulate our body. When our body budget is in deficit, we are more likely to experience negative emotions. And our physiology precedes our mood. Our mood precedes our thinking, and our thinking precedes our behavior. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these ways to regulate our body. And I'll start by talking about sleep. Now, when I talk about sleep and even other health behaviors, I often use the term domino behavior. And I use that term because behaviors are like dominoes often. You knock over one domino and then it hits the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And so when many people knock over the good, adequate sleep domino, it's likely to hit the I wake up energized and I have the energy to go to the gym. And then that hits the I need less caffeine and I need less sugar to get through my day. And it hits the I get to the end of the day and I still have energy to do meaningful and engaging things with family, friends, or in community. And so the dominoes can actually work in both directions. And so if we hit the not enough bad sleep domino, then it can lead to a cascade of events that don't support our overall health, thriving, and well-being. And so when we think about the connection between energy and motivation, sleep is probably one of the top things we can do to fuel our energy and support a feeling of motivation. Now, for many of us who are running through life saying that we just don't feel motivated, it could be that we're just in a chronic state of exhaustion and we're just never really fully rested and refreshed enough to feel excited and energetic enough to pursue some of our worthy goals. Okay. After sleep, we can think about movement. And I won't say a lot about movement because, again, there's just so much that can be said about movement. But I will say this. Often when we think about movement, we think about exercise in a formal capacity to accomplish some great health goal, like lose 20 pounds or drop our A1C or get ready for a marathon or a 5K or 10K. But we sometimes neglect to think that even 30 seconds of movement can change our mood, can change our energy. And so being mindful that even a little bit of movement can change our mood in an instant is one way that we might be able to better manage our body and our energy so that we're more likely to feel motivation towards the things that we've set out as goals for ourselves. Okay, nutrition, just really quickly. Like many of you, I love a big stack of pancakes with maple syrup on it. But I know that when I eat a lot of processed sugar and flour and a big stack of pancakes, that is going to affect my energy in one way. And I'm not saying that you can't eat pancakes, but what I'll say is that if you are trying to be more motivated to accomplish a goal, you should try to be a little bit more mindful about how what you eat fuels your body and affects your energy level and resultant motivation. Okay. Again, don't have to be perfect with nutrition, but just understand that what we eat affects our energy, and then our energy and what's happening in our body affects our mood, and then affects our thinking and our behavior. All right, so those three things are pretty common things to think about. Now I want to talk about the little bit more obscure ones. And the first thing I want to talk about is posture. And so if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy of Harvard University, you may have heard about power posing and how when we assume certain postures, there's a tendency for us to feel a certain way. But I'll keep it even simpler for you than that. Again, if we go back to the idea that our brain evolved to regulate our body, our brain has to figure out what's going on from the signals it's getting from our body and what's going on from the signals in our environment, and then allocate resources. Our energy is different when we change posture or position. And so standing is different from sitting, and sitting is different from lying. When we're standing, our heart rate and our blood pressure is higher. When we sit, our heart rate and our blood pressure goes down. And when we lie down, our heart rate and our blood pressure go down even further. And so this makes sense. And it's one of the reasons why when you lie down, even when you're not tired, sometimes you fall asleep. Because being in that posture or being in that position, the brain says, I'm in a posture that tends to equate with rest. And so I should probably start winding the body down. And so again, changing posture can change our energy. It's one of the reasons why standing desks are becoming more popular in office culture. Because if we're just sitting in front of a computer screen hunched over, not only are we more likely to experience pain in our body, but our energy will be a certain quality. And so again, we can affect our energy by changing our posture. All right, breathing is another thing that we can do to affect our energy. And I heard a yoga instructor describe it this way once. He said that we have wine breathing, coffee breathing, and water breathing. And I thought it was a really eloquent way to compare how those things affect our body. So water breathing is a more balanced breath with an equal inhale and exhale, and is good for restoring balance and homeostasis and just keeping us nice and even keel. Coffee breathing would be rapid breathing or forceful breathing that can activate our sympathetic nervous system, which can give us energy. And then wine breathing is slow breathing with long exhales that can create a relaxation response or activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And so again, our breath can affect our body and our energies. All this talk about coffee and wine is actually making me think of a joke from comedian Ted Alexandro, and I probably won't say it as funny as he did, but he says that coffee and wine are his life coaches. Coffee's there to smack him on the butt in the morning and say, go get him. And then wine is there at night to say, hey, you gave it your best. We'll get him tomorrow. Keep your chin up. And I think the genius of this joke is that when we have trouble managing our energy through sleep, nutrition, or movement, we often rely on drugs or substances to create some mood altering or body altering effect. No judgment. I like a good cup of coffee every now and then myself. Okay, so the last two things that we can do to regulate our energy or manage our energy are dealing with our experience of pain. And I know that I can't say anything that's going to solve chronic pain or acute pain in a video, but what I'll say is this: when we are in pain, our body budget is generally running a deficit. And so it makes it harder for us to feel certain positive emotions and the motivation to want to pursue certain things. In addition to sapping our body budget and affecting our mood through our physiology, the fear of being in pain may sometimes stop us from pursuing things that could positively affect our body or our mind. So again, I just want to highlight that there is a connection between if we are experiencing pain in our body and our resultant mood and resultant motivation. Okay, and the last one that I want to talk about is our physical connection to other people. Now, some of you have heard of the hormone oxytocin, and oxytocin is sometimes referred to as the cuddle hormone. And as social creatures, there is a deep need for us to be connected to other people, and we thrive when we can connect. There's actually an infamous study that some of you may have heard about where orphans were deprived of touch. They were fed and they were changed, but they weren't held and touched. And some of them died. And it just started to emphasize how important physical touch is to our thriving. And touch is one way that we regulate our body budget. And so when we are physically connected to other people, our body budget is more balanced. And when our body is in a good state, it's more likely that we will feel a positive mental state as well. Okay, I know we have a long list of things to consider, and I don't give you this long list so that now you have more homework and you got to get all A's in all these subjects. I simply present it as options, and you might find that simply choosing one thing to focus on is the positive domino that you need that helps to get your momentum going. Okay, before I end it, I want to put back on my coaching hat and ask a question, and the question is this. If you look back over the last day, over the last week, or over the last month, what's one thing that you have done to nurture your body and support your energy? It can be big or small. Maybe you had a really good workout, maybe you chose a healthy meal, maybe you stopped and meditated, maybe you walked around the block. Whatever it is, think about one thing that you've done to nurture your body. Okay, now that you have that one thing in your mind, I want to invite you to, if you choose, to celebrate the work that you put into nurturing your body. Now, sometimes we dismiss the little steps that we take, but sometimes the first little step is all we need to get the ball rolling to build up a little bit of momentum. Now, I know in this video we talked a lot about managing our body and our energy and how that supports our motivation. And I want to digress just to bring in how our thinking can potentially affect our behavior and our motivation. Many people have a harder time celebrating small wins. But I'll just ask you this. If you take one small action that's positive, but then you start thinking, oh, that's no good. I didn't really do anything. How motivated will you be to return to that small action? The answer is probably not that motivated. And so sometimes we demotivate ourselves by looking at the actions that we can take as being useless, futile, or not important. But if we can make a switch and we can start appreciating even the small actions that we take, then that pattern may be just the positive snowball that we need to get us on track. For example, we take that one small action. It boosts our energy. It adds to our well-being. We celebrate it. And when we celebrate something, it's more likely that when we get an opportunity to engage in it again, we will engage in it again. And then we celebrate, and then we do it, and then we celebrate, and then we celebrate. And then this positive thing goes where the behavior is fueling both our body and our thinking. And our thinking is reinforcing our behavior. Okay, before I close, let's just recap again. Put these thoughts together. Motivation is an emotion, and emotion changes all the time based on situation. What's happening in our body is a huge part of our situation. And when we can better manage our body and our energy, we create the environment that is more likely to yield the feeling of motivation. Our physical state and our physiology precedes our mood. Our mood precedes our thinking, and our thinking precedes our behavior. And so if we are trying to change our mood, we can try to do it with thinking, but if we address what's going on in our body, that may be a more powerful way of actually changing how we feel. And then changing how we feel can change how we think. Changing how we think then changes what we do. Okay, I know I said a lot again, but until later, be well, be kind to your body, and go hug someone. Peace.